Welcome everybody. This is part 3 of the series of videos I have been making on providing you with Chief Mates oral examination questions as being asked in December 2019. This is right hot off the press, and the credit goes to the students who have been taking out time to provide me with the questions as they come out of the exam room. And this is especially for those students who are appearing for their certification examinations in Australia. But I'm sure, irrespective of wherever you are giving your exams, you will definitely benefit from this bank of questions. Now, normally, if you have been seeing my videos, you will see that I do take up a set of questions and provide you with detailed answers about it. You can find those videos in the links in the description section below. But these questions are from December 2019. I am only going to provide you with the questions and not necessarily discussing the answers, but I will provide you with the tips as given by the students themselves. Another thing before I start is that many of these questions have been answered in separate videos on my channel. So please make sure you go into my channel and look for the videos that helps you to answer questions in different areas of ship operations, such as ship stability, cargo work, rules of the road, bridge equipment, anything under the sun. Marine law has been discussed on my channel, and you can find videos regarding that. So let's get started with today's channel. So in today's video, the questions have been provided by James, and he took about 1 hour to pass his exams. He went for his orals on 3rd of December, and he provides with some tips about the surveyor, where he describes the surveyor as a genuine person who's very practical as well as has a theoretical approach to orals. The surveyor will do his best to make the orals flow like a conversation and has no problem in rewording his questions if you aren't clear on what he requires from you. The surveyor started off with a brief chat and shared a couple of jokes. Sometimes the questions were direct and obvious, and other times they were incredibly practical, which allowed for your own approach and the possibility to take the answer in the direction you wanted. In all cases, he expects your practical approach or response as a chief officer on a ship. Answers are somewhat in order of how it went, but not exactly. But for you guys who are watching this video, make sure that you note down the questions. And remember, a very important tip from the student is that you have to provide practical answers. That means you would provide a response as you would act on your ship. Practically, don't only provide memorized and bookish answers from your books. Do put yourself in that situation and answer accordingly. So the question was, you have a container leaking on deck, what do you do? The student provided a response saying that the question was one of the broadest and allowed him to take the approach from a chief officer response from the bridge and also from the deck. Typical answer is stop loading, do not let anyone begin any shipboard oil pollution emergency plan, as early identification of the possibly dangerous cargo leaking is priority. So make sure that you stop loading, identify the cargo, the type of the cargo, and only then you should be beginning the cleanup operations. This is because some of the cargoes sometimes may emit dangerous fumes or dangerous vapors, and if you straight away go down there to start cleaning it, you may inhale some of these vapors and harm yourself. So it is better to get to know what kind of cargo it is, what are the special properties as described in the IMDG code. Then you should be dressed up in appropriate protective equipment before you start up with any kind of cleanup operations. Alright, so of course you will be looking at the container markings, finding out its location in the dangerous goods manifest or in the loading plan, bay plan, find out what cargo it is, consult the dangerous goods manifest, and have the container removed if required before sailing, because if the cargo has been leaking, that means a container is damaged or the packaging has been damaged, and such kind of leaking cargo will not be accepted in the destination port. So it is advisable that if possible, with minimum movement, you should be able to remove the container from the vessel. You have a junior officer in charge of loading and a couple of containers will be placed on deck. What information should you provide? So the student of course talked about cargo securing manual, about lashing coefficients, and the container code or the container safe carriage of containers code, then marine order 32 and marine order 42 as well. What kind of record keeping is the chiefment doing on bridge? So talk about whatever log books you maintain. So you can talk about garbage record books and any other special required, or oil record book, or if you have, depends on the kind of ship as well. So if you have your standing orders, or you can talk about all those kind of record keeping or log books on bridge. You can also start off by saying, talking about general logbooks like deck logbooks and all that. So you can talk about that as well. The surveyor asked what he knows about high density bulk cargoes. So the student of course joked about the IMSBC, or the International Bulk Carrier Code, being the only one he has ever seen. He discussed some of the characteristics of high density bulk cargoes, talked about the stowage factor and the precautions regarding loading that, and what kind of publications will help in loading of high density bulk cargoes. Also, he talked about marine order 34, 35, the IMSBC, and bulk loading, unloading, or that is blue code. He was asked about precautions when loading grain. So you have to know about the properties of the grain. So talk about the dry shift of cargoes, how it should be stored, how it should be secured. You can talk about flammable dust, expansion from moisture, or you can talk about the transportable moisture limit. You can talk about how it can emit flammable dust, which requires fire prevention, or entering the compartment with the protective gear and making sure ventilation is taking place throughout, treating it as an enclosed space if you're entering it once the cargo has been loaded. So talk about making sure that crane and cargo is clean, the holes are clean, it's not wet. There is that during if there is any rain showers, you will be closing down or locking down the hatch covers. So there are many things to talk about. I will not go into the details of it, but make sure that once you know the properties of grain, you can then talk about precautions when loading grain. You mentioned adequate stability. What sort of calculations would you expect to make? So the student of course went and talked about the volumetric density calculations, trimmed and untrimmed cargo, and the possibility of cargo shifting, the IMO criteria for loading grain, stability criteria, etc., etc. You load a container on deck. Is there stability at play here? So here the student was smart enough and he used this opportunity to talk about the movement of the center of gravity in depth and calculating stability the entire duration of the lift. So as you know, with the container being lifted, if the ship's cranes are being used, how the center of gravity will shift, or how the center of gravity shifts with cargo loading on deck or under deck. And this is what you have to be talking about. The surveyor also asked about the precise distance of the movement of center of gravity and by how much. So here the student of course talked about the GG1 formula, which talks about weight by distance moved divided by the ship's displacement. So of course, if you have been studying ship stability, you must have dealt with this. Otherwise, you can watch my videos on ship stability. I have dealt with some of these questions which involve movement of the center of gravity, which is known as GG1, that is the movement of the center of gravity with loading or discharging, and you can talk about that. The surveyor also asked about IMO stability criteria, angle of flooding, to which the student also drew a GZ diagram and showed how the angle of flooding may be calculated. Then he was asked about what would you do as a chief officer in preparation for a load line survey. Now this is a very long question. Make sure you go about it in a systematic manner, and you can, if you want, take some time as a surveyor so that you can not jot down the points before you start answering for this question, because any kind of survey preparations has long answers to it. You pretty much have to cover a lot of topics, so make sure you write them down so that you can answer them in a systematic manner. You can take a few minutes. I'm sure the surveyor will be happy to provide you with those few minutes and you can write it down. He was also asked about many certificates, the kind of certificates every ship should carry, and this is a hot topic. This is being asked quite frequently of surveyors, and they are being the students are being asked about the kind of certificates that every ship should carry. Now of course there are some certificates which are normal for all kinds of ships, and then there are some additional certificates which are required to be carried depending on the kind of ship you are. Now I have made separate videos on this. Please go make sure that you go and watch those videos. I've pretty much covered most of the certificates to be carried, the validity period, who issues it, what kind of surveys are required for renewing that certificate. So I think you should be happy with that. The surveyor also asked about the certificate validities, what kind of surveys are required for renewal, like harmonized surveys, annual surveys, what are interim surveys, initial surveys, what is document of compliance or safety management certificate, who assigns these certificates, so on and so forth. The surveyor also asked about internal audits on these, and you can probably talk about ISM internal audits here, so which the company carries out before any external audit is carried out. So there you can talk about how a vessel prepares for internal audit. It is pretty much very similar to how a vessel would prepare for external audit, except that the internal audit is carried out by the company itself. It is carried out mainly by the designated person ashore, and then he provides you with a report. That report also goes to the party that will be carrying out your external survey, so you can talk about that. The survey says you mentioned a document of compliance and safety management certificate for ISM, and ISM has some other important parts. Do you know what these are? So the student then talked about the 6 functional requirements of the ISM and gave examples of each. Now make sure you watch my video on the ISM code. It's a separate video. It's been popularly watched. It's got a lot of views on it, and the reason is that I have covered ISM code extensively and in detail in that video. So I'll try to give you the link in the description section below, but then there are so many questions, so many areas, I can't give you the links to all the videos, but I'll try my best. So if you can't find the link in the description section below, then make sure you go into my channel and look for the playlist on vessel or ship management, and you will find the videos there. The surveyor also asked about certificates and some certificates being attached to them. It was talking about the Maritime Labor Convention certificate part 1, part 2, and form E that is associated with it. You learn of a fire in the bosun's store. What would you do? The student said he would go straight to safety drills, the expected class of fire, the gear that may be used, and continue to reinforce safety of the crew. And this is a very important tip again given to you by the student, that anytime any operational questions or emergency questions are asked, remember to prioritize safety of crew before you prioritize anything else. Always keep safety in mind. Make sure that people are safe. The surveyor may tempt you into compromising safety. Make sure you don't fall for that, and always keep safety paramount. What if the fire is out? Do you have to observe any precautions? So constant reconfirmation is required that fire is out, increased frequency of fire rounds, refilling the self-contained breathing apparatuses, inspect all fire gear used and put back into service. There's another incident where you have been involved in a collision and you are leaking fuel. Discuss that. What would you do? The student talked about damage stability, calculations involving damage stability, planned list, how to list the ship in such a way that the leakage of the fuel stops. This is an intentional list carried out by shifting of cargo or shifting of ballast. Then you can also talk about reporting procedures, MARPOL, and this will involve you discussing the ISM checklist that you have in collision cases, and also you have to combine it with an ISM checklist that involves leakage of fuel into the sea. So it's a long answer. I'm sure if you go on the right track you won't have to complete it, but talk about everything. Talk about how you would also prevent pollution, start taking measures towards preventing pollution, because that will become a big issue, and also talk about keeping the ship safe as you would in a collision incident. Talk about getting assistance from all the parties that you can. Make sure you get parties involved, inform the relevant parties who can come in and assist you. So talk about all that thing. It's a long answer as the student has provided, and you will have to pretty much cover a lot of these areas. But if you go on the right track, I'm pretty much sure that the surveyor will be happy to stop you somewhere in the middle. What about the duties of the other vessels? And of course, here you talk about the master's obligation to render assistance, which is required by law, especially if it is safe for the vessel to do so, or if the other master has requested your vessel to depart from there. If they don't need your assistance and they assure you that you can leave, then you can do so. If there is any rescue coordination center involved, or if there are any shore parties involved who are carrying out the operations or supervising the operations, and if they provide you with the permission to leave, then of course you can do that. What do you know about a focus inspection campaign? So here you have to talk about the port state control and the memorandum of understanding that the port states have with each other, where they actually form where a few port states, they actually combine forces to cover as many ships as possible in as many countries as possible. So make sure to talk about that. Then as a chief officer, what do you know about garbage and how do you make sure you're complying on board? So here you have to talk about the garbage management plan and the garbage record book, the entries to be made in garbage record book, what is comprised in a garbage management plan, how do you train the crew, toolbox training, talk about labeling of bins, discharge of crew, what is the discharge of garbage, how do you discharge different classes of garbage, what kind of entries do you make in the garbage logbook, what kind of garbage is incinerated, what kind of garbage is landed ashore. So talk all about Marpol and X5 basically. All right, and then you have to incorporate the garbage management plan into that as well. When a pilot comes on board, how is he introduced into the bridge? So make sure you talk about master greeting, exchanging of information, establishing communications, use of the pilot card, bridge resource management, basic principles of bridge watchkeeping and how the officer should be involved, what should the helmsman be doing, the duties of the officer and the master on the bridge, and when to question the pilot, and all the information that is exchanged, documentation, understanding of the passage plan. There are many things here as well. What if the pilot was coming by helicopter? How would you prepare? So here the student talked about Marine Order 57, which pretty much covers this topic of helicopter operations or boarding of, or rather the pilot boarding the vessel using a helicopter. Let's talk about search and rescue. Anything in particular you need on board? So here you can talk about the IMSAR Volume 3 for mobile facilities. IMSAR, as you know, stands for International Aeronautical Mobile Search and Rescue publication. Was that correct? International Aeronautical Maritime Search and Rescue, not mobile. What sort of information would you find on the pilot card? So talk about the pilot card. I've got videos on that as well, on to what information should a pilot card contain. It should basically comprise of all of ship's particulars that is relevant for maneuvering, and also talk about the ship's engine, basically on the characteristics, the maneuvering characteristics, the ship handling characteristics, the movement of the rudder, the ship's engine's power, so on and so forth. Discuss compass errors and why we do them. So here you have to talk about what is compass error. It's the difference between true and compass bearing. Why do you need compass errors? How can you calculate deviation? Why is deviation important? What is variation? So you should start off, and if you have command over it, talk as much as you can. So remember, an important tip here is whatever questions you have command over, talk as if you are an expert, and that will impress the surveyor. So here I've covered deviation. How do you know your pilot ladder is suitable for use? So recently I have put up a marine notice video. You will find that 2019 marine notice video on safety of pilot ladders, and that has been issued by AMSA, or the Australian Maritime Safety Authority. Make sure you watch that video, and in that it's pretty much covered. Other than that, some basic seamanship practices dictate you testing the pilot ladder, making sure it's rigged as per the pilot's instructions, and making sure communications are established with the pilot to ensure that the pilot ladder has been rigged as per their satisfaction. A failure to do so may result in heavy fines being incurred on the ship, and the pilot will also complain, which will put your ship in trouble, and the company is not going to be very happy with you and your performance. Sometimes you are at anchor. Tell me, what things would you do on anchor watch? So remember, whenever a question like this is asked, always focus on the anchor watch. Don't say I will be correcting charts or listening to music or distracting yourself in any way from the anchor watch. Always talk about your duties during the anchor watch, how you will be checking for the ship's position through different ways, how you'll be keeping a lookout for other vessels dragging anchor, your own vessel dragging anchor, how you will be conducting or asking the crew to conduct anchor rounds. We talk about ship security, talk about keeping a fire patrol. So a lot of things come into play here, so make sure you always talk about that. If the surveyor tempts you by saying you can find some time to do chart corrections, do not fall for that trap. Make sure you are completely focused on the anchor watch. Your second mate has made a passage plan. What are some of the things you will check? Precautions of his passage. So make sure that correct route is being monitored, safety depth, grounding zones, talk about cross-track error, constant readjustment of the safety settings at each stage of the voyage, suitable layers, etc. And make sure always you talk about passage plan being approved by the master and the senior management on the deck side before any changes are made and accepted. During a passage, a container ship, you experience some rough weather. Can you discuss parametric rolling? So make sure here you talk about parametric rolling and the precautions to be observed. Here you can also talk about synchronous rolling, synchronous pitching. You can go into the depths of it if you have command in that area. I have made videos on that. You can watch those videos. But basically here you have to talk about how to keep your ship safe, how to adjust the ship's course and speed to reduce this parametric rolling, because sometimes parametric rolling can lead to situations where ships may capsize or develop an angle of roll, or serious damage to the ship structure can also occur. You are at the end of your voyage going towards a port. Are there any specific effects on the ship that you may experience once you leave the open sea? So here the student has again smartly talked about the ship handling and the terms of bank effect, ship's attraction, shallow water effect, squat, and Bernoulli's theorem. You may also go into all that. I have made videos on ship handling also, so make sure you watch those videos. I keep referring to my videos because I am unable to answer all these questions in one video. This video will become too long, so that's why I keep referring to my videos where you will find the answers to these questions. How often do you need to replace the fall wires of a lifeboat? So the student said it's 5 years, and when asked again, the student said, but in his company it's 2 years. So make sure you contact, or rather read up the appropriate SOLAS or the marine order or the relevant flag state regulation regarding the change or change of wires on your ships. Can you explain the difference between reversible propeller and a controllable pitch propeller? Tell me everything you know about the TRS. What is dead weight and what is bareboat charter? Again, I have videos on different kinds of charter, on TRS and weather. Make sure you watch those videos. Finally, he was asked about the ROR cards or rules of the road cards. He was asked about 4 buoys without top marks and he was required to put them together. That means there were 4 buoys that were placed in front of him, but the top marks were provided separately. So he had to put the correct top mark over the buoy, which would show that he knows the buoys and he knows the top marks associated with the buoys, and he also had to provide details of light characteristics and rhythms and how the vessel should pass those buoys if they face those buoys. Again, make sure you watch my videos on the rules of the road cards. I have about 25 odd videos on that. Different situations, I have discussed buoys there as well, so make sure you go through those flip cards videos. Then he was asked about 5 generic flip cards for days, shapes, and lights. He was asked about the minesweeper vessel and asked about the specific distance to stay away. Then about vessel aground, and he was also asked about 3 situations faced in sea, where there was a head-on situation with 2 power-driven vessels and obstruction on your starboard side. Then there was vessel on your port beam, both vessels converging, so risk of collision exists eventually, and a vessel towing, showing what are the fog signals, what about its tow, and what are the 2 things that a prolonged blast could be. So here they are. So make sure you watch the videos on the ROR cards and you will get a good understanding of each of these situations. They have been discussed multiple times. The more you practice these flip cards, the better you get at it. And then I have also given you tips on how to deal with these flip cards. Once you watch those videos, you will have a good understanding through my tips as well, how to identify the vessels, how to suggest action towards these vessels, and you have to put yourself in a situation as you would be at sea and provide practical answers based on the rules of the road. So guys, all the best. I have provided you with the questions here, and most of these questions have been covered by me in separate videos. If I have not covered some questions, I will surely make videos on it in the future. But in the meantime, all the best with your exam preparation, and I wish you lots of success. Bye for now.